We receive more messages in a single day than people in the Middle Ages received in their entire lifetime. The challenge for nonprofits is getting through all that.
She's one of the most sought-after voices in philanthropy, charitable giving, and transformational change.
Charity is about an immediate need. It's about something that's needed today to survive. Philanthropy is a longer view. What is going on in the community that I can help solve?
She's a Fulbright specialist, internationally recognized expert, and a frequent voice on NBC, CBS, and National Public Radio.
The fact is, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business strategy. We're still expected to work smart and have the best and the brightest working for us.
Lisa's ideas on giving patterns and transformational philanthropy have earned her trust from boardrooms to classrooms.
I wanted to change the world, and I discovered this whole wonderful sector of the nonprofit industry.
So my guest this week is Lisa Dietlin. She's one of the most sought-after voices in philanthropy, charitable giving, and transformational change. She's a Fulbright specialist, an internationally recognized expert, and a frequent voice on NBC, CBS, WGN, and National Public Radio. Lisa's ideas on giving patterns and transformational philanthropy have earned her trust from boardrooms to classrooms. And her 6 books are go-to guides for anyone who wants to turn generosity into real impact. Lisa, welcome to Giving Growth.
Happy to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining. And I want to start by understanding a little bit of your journey. How does someone get to a point where you write 6 books about a sector that you are clearly very passionate about?
Well, the funny answer is it starts with slippers and toys when I was in a hospital when I was little. The family story goes that I was hospitalized, and of course, my parents were working, and my mother came one day to the hospital, and there was a net over my bed. And they said, she went to the nurse's station and asked, like, why have you got my daughter a net over her crib? And they said, because she got out and she went to the toy box in the slipper room and she gave every child on the floor slippers and a toy to play. And they said she is like a troublemaker, and I'm thinking like, how busy were you guys that you didn't see this little kid running around and, giving away slippers and toys? And so I always say I was born with it, that my DNA it wasn't just me with the toys and slippers. Everybody had to have a toy and a slipper, and I was bound and determined to do it. But, I wanted to change the world. The short answer is I wanted to change the world. And surprisingly, I thought I would do it through politics. That was my first career path. And so I was a fundraiser. I raised all this money for candidates running for office, and unfortunately, they lost often. And I'd wake up very disappointed after the election, a little bit ashamed, like I'd promised somebody that, oh, they're going to win, and then they'd lose. And so after the 1990 elections, Greg, I thought, where could my talents be better used? And I discovered this whole wonderful sector of the nonprofit industry.
Well, and today you are the CEO of the Institute of Transformational Philanthropy. You're a faculty member at the DePaul University School of Public Service. I imagine that you have a broad perspective on the sector because you've seen it change over the years. And when I talk to typically C-suite leaders who work for typically large, charitable, US-based organizations, we often talk about the giving pyramid. It's a very classic concept, mass, mid, major donors. But everyone seems to recognize that, especially now with, not to use the term, but poor getting poorer and rich getting richer, and other changes that we're kind of affected by, that pyramid seems to be cracking. What are you hearing or seeing as these potential cracks in that classic giving pyramid?
It's a great question. And I think the short answer is we don't know what the final outcome is going to be. But what we see now is a lot of attention paid to the mega donors, especially in the US with the tax law changes that took effect in 2018 and doubling the standard deduction for individuals and couples, it no longer became advantageous to donate a little bit every year and take a little bit off your taxes, even though at that time, 70% of Americans were not itemizing, they were doing the standard deduction. So it became an even higher barrier or higher hurdle, Greg, to jump. And so I see a lot of it's just like a lot of focus on the mega donors. Just like we see on Wall Street that I want an instant return on investment. I want this growth, and we often overlook those at the bottom or in the middle of the pyramid that really could make transformational gifts if you paid attention to them. But our boards, our initiatives, the cutting back of federal and state funding, maybe even local funding, is meaning that the need is so great that you're like, how can I get this quick win? And it's the mega donor in your community, that really wealthy individual, family, the altruists, the dynasty families that always give, that we're paying a lot of attention to. And yet, that's how I started my journey writing my books and doing my research, was by this Overlook group called Entrepreneurs.
And you actually wrote a book on the topic,
Yeah.
and you've worked with many entrepreneurs who have
Yes.
chosen to give away, substantial resources for charities. What motivates entrepreneurs to give?
It's there at repaying. If you've ever read the Seven Faces of Philanthropy, which was an early book, an early research book out in the 90s, they break it into seven categories of why people gave. The altruism, or, devout, communitarian, altruist, dynasty, socialite, and repayer. And repayer is what an entrepreneur is. They want to repay back those entities, those individuals that helped them along the way. They don't forget that bank that loaned them money. They don't forget that neighbor that gave them space over their garage. They don't forget, the teacher at school that helped them. And so when they end up with all these resources, as an entrepreneur being successful, they want to repay. But if you're like me, when I first started my career, Greg, I was I did corporate relations, raising money from corporations in the nonprofit sector, and then I went to major gifts. And so I just went to the high titled people at Ford, Chrysler, Dow Corning, Dow Chemical, because I lived in Michigan, the automotive industry, the chemical industry, Whirlpool, Upjohn. And I remember I was meeting with the president of Dow Corning. And Gary Anderson was his name, and he said to me, he was an alumnus of the university, and he said, "Why are you visiting me, Lisa?" I said, "Well, Gary, you're the president of Dow Corning." He goes, "No, what I mean is, like, I have a high income as long as I have this job. But the minute I don't have this job, that could go away." He said, "The real wealth in this country is with the entrepreneurs." And
Hmm.
honestly, Greg, at that point in my life, I didn't know the difference between wealth and income. Like, just a lot of people seem to have a lot of money that I didn't have. And so I went and I started, and that began my journey of exploring these individuals that we often overlook. We want to go to McDonald's. We don't go to the farmer that provides the potatoes for the French fries. We want to go to Walgreens, but we don't think about the person that provides the shelving for all the stores of Walgreens. My favorite place to look is the bathrooms. I mean, people laugh at me when I give talks. I go, "Oh no, in the bathroom." Like, who makes those koala bear changing tables? Well, recently in America, all the men's rooms have to have them, just like the women's rooms have to have them to change their child's diapers and take care of their child while they're using the facilities. And I'm like, who makes those? We should be going and talking to that person. There's this whole world of entrepreneurs that we often skip over because, to your first question, we're looking at the very, very wealthy at the very top of the pyramid.
And the book is Transformational Philanthropy, Entrepreneurs and Nonprofits. This obviously is a topic that I can relate to, since I have been and I am entrepreneur for the last 15 years. Is there a mindset that entrepreneurs have that nonprofits need to align with if they are to be a target they go after?
Absolutely. There's really unique things about working with entrepreneurs, and that was what my graduate research was on, and the basis for the first book that has now been that research, the basis for research that has gone beyond what I initially did and continue to do. So there's a couple of things. We've already talked about them being repayers, wanting to repay those communities, entities, individuals that have helped support them. They truly believe that they want to do philanthropy versus charity. They
Hmm.
understand the need to feed somebody who's hungry today, but they want to solve the issue of hunger, which makes sense because if you're a home builder, you don't start a home building company, a construction company to build your house. You do it to build a neighborhood. If you, purchase or start a restaurant, you don't do it because you're hungry and you want to provide a meal that night. You do it because you want to provide that cuisine or fast food or fine dining or whatever it is in your community. That's what you want to do. So when you think about entrepreneurs, I mean, when you go to them as a nonprofit, they don't want to solve the problem that's facing you today. While they'll help with that, they want to solve it long term. What is the root cause of whatever issue you're facing? They want to delve into that. They often believe they have all the answers. And this is the
No.
dance I talk about because they are the smartest person about their business. They are. As an entrepreneur, they're the smartest about that home building company or about that restaurant that they have. They're the smartest about that. And everybody realizes they're smart about that because that's their expertise. They don't happen to be the smartest about how to run a food bank or how to run a library or how to clean up a river. They're not the smartest about that. So as a nonprofit, you have to do this dance where they're leading because they have some expertise and knowledge base, but you're also leading too. You have to educate them along the way. That's very critical for nonprofit leaders and executives to understand. You can't just say, "Oh yes, whatever you say, Mr. or Ms. Entrepreneur is perfect." It's not. You have to educate them. I was on a working with a client that works with foster care kids. And the entrepreneurs had great answers. Well, we just hire, we just hire more people. Well, yeah, but then you need to hire more supervisors, and then we need more space, and then and this is what our budget allows. And they're like, "Oh, they needed to be educated." It wasn't that it was a bad idea what they suggested. It was they didn't have all the information because they're not the smartest person in the room about foster care. So I think that. The other thing to know is that they all say, every entrepreneur I meet says, the more money they give away, the more money they make. And it's an unintended consequence, Craig. But
Hmm.
like someone will say, like, my business doing bad, I'll write a check to a nonprofit. And it's kind of like that old adage, you reap what you sow, or, throw it out and trust the universe to bring it back to you. Whatever faith or belief system you have, for a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, they go, "Oh yeah, when times get tough, I'm going to the charity, I'm writing a check and I'm sending it off, and all of a sudden good stuff starts happening in my business."
So I know that we're talking about entrepreneurs, and obviously I am drawn to this specific group of philanthropists. I myself give too. It's
Mhm.
probably tens of thousands right now to different charities, and that's something that makes me really happy, and I would love to scale that up over the years. But I really feel that this is less of a conversation about entrepreneurs specifically, but it's more about understanding truly who your, let's call it, target audience is and what motivates them, what language I need to use. And you talk about a distinction between philanthropy and charity, and you already referred to it. Can you just restate for me what is the difference between philanthropy and charity, and in the context of entrepreneurs, why is that distinction important?
Well, it's a great question. We use those words interchangeably in the nonprofit sector. We'll say it's a charity. We'll say it's a nonprofit. We'll say we're helping philanthropy. We just kind of jumble it all together. But there is a clear distinction between the words charity and philanthropy, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs. Charity is about an immediate need. It's about something that's needed today to survive. It's about something that is happening. It could be hunger, it could be homelessness, it could be medicine, it could be a rent payment, it could be, paying your staff of your nonprofit organization. It's needed today. In order for us to get through today, this has to happen. I need to have food. I need to have a house. I need to have, money to pay rent. I need to have money to pay my staff. That's charity. Philanthropy is a longer view saying, why are these kids at this school hungry? Why is that happening? What is going on in the community that I can help solve? Why are so many people unhoused? Why is homelessness spiking here in this community? What is the root cause of that? Why don't you have your medicine? Why don't you? Okay, I can help you get your medicine today, but what are we going to do tomorrow and a week from now and a month from now? Because this disease is not going away. So it's that longer term view, Greg, that entrepreneurs bring naturally because they look at the marketplace and they see a need that's not being met in their community, in their corner of the world, in their worldview. And they go, I I can make that happen. I can make that happen. It's a longer view, not like, well, I'll do that today and I'll do something else tomorrow. I mean, they have a longer view of solving that issue. Richard Branson, one of our great entrepreneurs, he didn't create Virgin Airlines so he could take a flight. He's like, I want to change the way people fly. I want to change this, mentality of how we fly. And went against the grain of everything, but he did it not just for himself and his family and his friends. He said, "No, I want to change this." And so he built Virgin Airlines. So I think that if you think about it in a way that short term and long term are immediate versus out into the future, that helps clarify the difference between philanthropy and charity. Understanding that entrepreneurs and everybody understands you got to give somebody food today so you can solve the problem tomorrow. It's that old adage, I don't want to give a person if I give a person a fish, they eat today. If I teach them how to fish, they can eat forever. And that's where entrepreneurs want to play. They want to play in that forever game. They understand the importance of the fish today, but they want to play in the forever game.
This resonates not just because of my personal experience. When I talk to many C-suite leaders, many fundraisers, there is a trend right now with, for example, GoFundMe or peer-to-peer giving, right? Let's say, my friend's mom has breast cancer. This is actually
Mhm.
something that I was just became aware of lately. And if she's raising money for her mom's help, she probably wouldn't go through American Cancer Association. She probably would do it through GoFundMe. And I think that charities are losing some of that attention to platforms like GoFundMe because they're not explaining the system that they have built to deliver aid to Ukraine, to deliver aid to when there was an earthquake in Turkey, to deliver aid to other parts of the world where there's crisis happening right now. And it does really sadden me that even though charities do philanthropy, we see them doing charity.
Mhm.
That's just my personal perspective. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're
Well, and I also
what you're
think
hearing.
we live in an instant gratification society. We have to understand that. One click and almost anything can be delivered to your home. One click and you can have food delivered, you can have a car delivered, you can have anything you want delivered. And I think the peer-to-peer platforms that you have described often give us that instant gratification. I help my friends with her mom with breast cancer. Giving to the American Cancer Society, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a longer horizon. That's not going to help my friend's mom today. So I think part of it too, we can click on our device, any point in time and know that we're getting the news or the latest trends or what's going on. And we're very impatient, especially Americans. We're very impatient people. We want everything immediately and that long-term focus that okay, we can help your mom today, or you could redirect those monies toward the American Cancer Society, and perhaps we could solve the issue of breast cancer. Well,
Yeah,
this is my problem today. And we have a hard time holding both thoughts in our head, it seems, at the same time.
it almost feels to me like charities can't win because we
Oh, yeah.
want charities to, and I would rather maybe use the term non for profits in this context. So we want non for profits to teach people how to fish when that's
Mhm.
possible, to your point. So that's about philanthropy.
Mhm.
And yet we're looking for this short-term gratification,
Mhm.
and that's charity. I feel that we're unwilling to choose one over the other, and we're getting confused in terms of what are we doing and how we are measuring success. And maybe that's where, if you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, right, famous study that's been going on for many years, and trust in NGOs is going down. And I wonder if that's part of the problem because of this philanthropy to charity tension.
It is. And I think because of the proliferation of nonprofits, before COVID started in America, the IRS received 100 applications a day from entities wanting to be nonprofit organizations. So, for our listeners and viewers who don't know how a nonprofit is formed, you first, in the United States, you incorporate in your state or a state, usually through the Secretary of State or the Attorney General's office. You incorporate. And once you get your incorporation papers, you're a corporation, you apply to the federal government through the IRS to be tax exempt. And I often remind people that 501c ruling is a tax status, not a business plan. You still
Hmm.
have to have a business plan. Before COVID in the United States, the IRS was receiving 100 applications a day. Today, Greg, they're receiving 264 applications a day. I mean, we've doubled and a half it. Everybody has an idea for a nonprofit, and I think that lends to confusion. So last night I was having dinner with a friend, and as we're driving to the restaurant, she's telling me about her partner and what they're trying to do, and that the entity they're working for might not be able to continue on, and it's a corporation. And she said, "But the information you deliver is so important. Why don't you start a nonprofit?" And I about slammed on the brakes. I'm like, whoa. And this woman works in the nonprofit sector. And I said to her, "Hey, listen," I said, "well, may I offer a different opinion?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "I hear what you're saying, but to set up a whole nonprofit, blah, blah." I said, "You run a nonprofit. Why can't she be a program of your nonprofit? It is aligned. It is in the LGBTQ community. It's aligned. It's like to like." And she's like, "Oh, I never thought of that." So I think part of our confusion too is somebody has an idea that could be a program of an existing nonprofit, but they go out and start a new nonprofit organization. For example, think about all the cancer organizations you hear of: the American Cancer Society, Lynn Sage Breast Cancer, the Susan G. Komen, the Live Strong Foundation. I mean, the American Lung Association dabbles in. I mean, goes on and on, and none of those are bad. None of those are bad. But if I'm your friend whose mom is hurting and needs some help, I don't have time to go through and research those 5 organizations I just mentioned. I'm going to start a GoFundMe, peer-to-peer fundraising, and say, "Hey Greg, can you help me out?" That instant gratification, instant, response.
So this is a good segue into another area that I have seen as a leitmotif in everything you've published, and you've talked about this idea that some people see the nonprofit sector itself as part of the problem.
Mhm.
Can you unpack this for us?
Ah. Yes, I absolutely can. The beauty of teaching, I love teaching at DePaul University, and I teach graduate students, and they bring new ideas to me. And sometimes I'm like, "Okay, I don't know what that is." And that's what happened when I learned about the nonprofit industrial complex. And
Yes.
the chat went wild. Like, so I teach in the flex modality, some students online, some in the classroom. I have guest speakers. It is like I'm producing this show, Greg, multimedia. And a student raised the issue. And I was like, "Okay, I don't know enough about that." But then I started doing research. And the premise is that because the nonprofit sector is dependent upon government and corporations, as well as what we're talking about, the ultra wealthy, the mega donors, that they're actually carrying out the policies that are causing the problems. So if I'm cutting, funding for food for the SNAP benefits in America or the Farm Bill, I'm cutting out that. But then I'm telling you what you have to do to get money from the government in order to deliver those programs. Am I perpetuating the problem versus stepping outside the box and saying, okay, how am I going to solve the issue of hunger and feeding these kids because the funding's gone away? There's actually a thought, and it's long been around. Lynn Twist talks about it in The Soul of Money, that, when you accept money from a corporation or a large entity or like a government wealthy individual, are you actually accepting the guilt and the blame associated with that perpetuates the system that exists? The challenge I pushed back on my students, Greg, was then what is the alternative? I hear what you're saying. There's truth in it. Um, there might be a lot of truth in it uh, that we're perpetuating. The fact that you have not, or you have corporations that won't pay a living wage and then they want to give to housing, subsidized housing because their employees can't afford to buy a house because they're not paying a living wage, or medical insurance, they want to give to the healthcare clinic down the street that their employees use because they're not paying a living wage that includes health insurance. Are we, by accepting money from that corporation, perpetuating the cycle? And I think right now we're in this inflection point where, okay, do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? That proverbial saying, do we, okay, that's it, nonprofit sector, you're gone. But then what replaces it? Is it this crowdfunding and peer to peer that has immediate, instant gratification? But will that solve the long term issues? If I've got a river flowing through my city that's polluted, and I decide, okay, I'm not going to use the nonprofit. We're just going to do a GoFundMe. We're going to clean up our part of the river, and we do, and it's beautiful. And we're picnicking, and there's flowers, and there's a community garden. But upstream, somebody doesn't do that, and that stuff flows downstream. Then we're back in that, wait a minute, we got to have a bigger, holistic, long-term philanthropy solution to how this river stays clean versus a short-term, I'm going to take care of me and mine.
This topic is so charged because my experience is that, for example, the cost expense ratios, nonprofits very proudly exhibit as a proof that they're not wasting donors' money. I think it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, yes, you want these charities to be efficient and you want the money to go to the people in need versus someone's salary. But on the other hand, we need professionals to be in an industry where there's an increasing pressure to focus on impact and show what that money is actually doing. And again, this to me feels like this tug of war. We talk about charity versus philanthropy, right? There's this tension, short term, long term. And there's also this tension maybe here on a different axis. I don't know what kind of framework I'm building here, but there's also this tension between how professional we want charities to be because they're supposed to solve systemic problems. But we're also not very happy when someone makes, a good amount of money making change. And you talk about 16.8 million people who are employed in the nonprofit sector in the US, and it's a significant force. Is the professionalization of the space a good thing or a bad thing, or that's not even the way to think about it?
You raise a couple really, really great points here. First of all, the 16.8 million people that work in this sector, it means it's the largest employment sector in the United States. Now, when I talk to the U.S. Census Bureau people, they remind me we're not a designated sector. And I'm like, it makes me crazy. But the fact of the matter is, it is the largest employer, followed by retail and then manufacturing. So you have this whole group of people that are working to do good in the world. And they need to be paid a living, if not sustainable, and family wage. When I get very frustrated when people make comments like, well, I want it all to go to program. I don't want it to go to salaries. I'm like, who do you think runs those programs? Who is that not programmatic that you just want to give money and who's going to give it to the school to buy the food for the kids or to clean up the river, to buy the rakes and the hose and the lawnmower? Who's going to do that? Well, volunteers. Well, who's going to recruit the volunteers? You know, the fact is, nonprofit is a tax status, not a business strategy.
Hmm.
Remember, we're still a corporation. We're still expected to work smart. We're expected to work strategic and have the best and the brightest working for us. The good news is people want to work for the nonprofit sector. They want to do amazing work for it. So I think the professionalization is a good thing. The degree programs like I'm in at DePaul University that I lead and others are bringing us more into the 21st century and saying, these people need to be paid a wage that is commensurate with the expectation. So, two story of their job. Two things I want to share. One is when I was working out at this gym, there was a woman beside me who learned what I did, and she goes, "Well, Lisa, I don't give to charities that spend more than 3% on overhead." And I go, "Well, then you're a damn fool." And she said, "What?" And I go, "Can you and your husband live on 3% of your income and put all the rest toward, your retirement and your vacation fund?" She goes, "Well, no." I go, "Well, how are you expecting a nonprofit to do that?" I said, "If you're finding them, they're burying it somewhere else. They're burying it in marketing, education. They're burying it somewhere else because that's your standard." She goes, "Oh." I said, not acceptable that would be your go-to, that 3% mark. The other thing is, I had my students do this comparison, and we looked at AARP and we looked at Sling TV. AARP is at
Hmm.
$1.9 billion dollars at that time, and Sling was at $2 billion. Okay, so pretty much apple to apples. Okay, this person, this CEO, was paid $800,000 plus 400,000 in deferred compensation. Students like, oh my gosh, this person was paid 4 million at Sling. 4 million at Sling versus 800,000 plus 400,000 in deferred compensation. Both the same size revenue. One has a nonprofit status, one has a for profit status. Again, your tax status is your tax status. It's not your business strategy. And I would say that AARP has a bigger brand recognition than Sling TV does. No offense to Sling TV, but I was like, so why is it because at the time this person was a woman at AARP and this person at Sling was a man? Was it a gender based thing? You know? Um, or really was the person at Sling TV that much smarter, that much more strategic, that much more business savvy that they should be paid, 4 times the amount the person running AARP is being paid? And my students like, wow. And I was like, why do we do that? AARP has a huge brand in the United States. Why would we assume that they should be paid 25% in the terms of the leadership of their salary of what the person at Sling TV was being paid? One of my colleagues, she actually was a student of mine in master's program. She's now leading at Louisiana State University, the nonprofit institute there. Heather wrote about in Minnesota at a food bank. Same sort of thing. Six-figure salary revealed, and they fired the person because people, got that little thread and said, "Oh my God, they're making six figures. They should be paying. They should be all the money going to programs." Well, what you want the best and brightest running the food bank thinking about logistics, transportation, fuel costs, purchasing power. When you want the best and the brightest running your food bank and pay them a commensurate salary versus somebody that you're going to pay a lesser salary that doesn't understand any of those things, I get very fired up about this because we call it in the sector, Greg, a passion tax. Like one of my friends, Joelle Mogerman, she is the first woman president of the Philadelphia Zoo. I am so proud of her. And she says, yeah, it's a passion tax. People say to me, we don't have to pay you as much because you work with the animals at the zoo. I'm like, oh, that helps. I mean, they don't tell Joanne that specifically, or Joelle that specifically, but she said they hear it oftentimes like, "Oh, you get to work with the animals though." Well, going to the grocery store and putting the gallon of milk on the conveyor belt and saying, "Hey, by the way, I work at the zoo." The gallon of milk still costs the same amount. I actually interviewed for a job at a Big Ten school, and they paid half of what a public university was going to pay me to do the job. And I had the exact conversation. They said, "Well, it's a benefit to say you worked here." And I go, "It's only a benefit when I leave and put it on my resume." The gallon of milk on the conveyor belt at the grocery store is going to cost the same amount whether I work here or work at the public university. And they're like, okay, you're right. Don't give me the passion tax. It's a passion tax because you get to work at a Big Ten school. No, it's not. It just means I get to live in poverty.
I almost would propose that we apply a passion premium because my experience with working with fundraisers is that they're actually stressed out more because they're actually saving lives. If I work with Sling TV or my
Mhm.
agency, I'm sorry, we're not. And fundraisers often are.
Yeah.
And maybe they should be actually paid more than people in the for-profit sector. But I also think that there is a fundamental measurement problem because, to your point, Sling TV, that CEO and that team is measured on value that they generate, and that value is easily measurable, stock price.
Correct.
And charities obviously don't have that mechanism. Just like my company is a privately held company, there's no way
Mhm.
to gauge our success using an external metric because we don't release those metrics. If I had investors, they would be looking less at the money I spend and more at the revenue I generate. And there is a fundamental problem with the sector's inability, because it is a bit intrinsic in defining its impact. And I wish that we could come up with a standard way, like there's a stock market
Mhm.
of value of measuring a charity's impact. Maybe it's really a value measurement problem. And that's
Could
why
be.
we're focusing on costs because there's nothing else for us to measure.
It could be. Um, it's also we don't allow them, Dan Pallotta's done some great work in this area, and we don't allow nonprofits to have a runway to ramp up. If we give a researcher $100,000 to research cancer or Alzheimer's, we want at the end of the year them to have made great progress. Versus if we give someone $100,000 to create a new technology for ABC. I mean, what was it? The PlayStation 2 was like, I don't know, 14 double digit years before it came out. Everybody's standing in line waiting for it. And, for some reason, we give technology companies, profit companies, a long runway to
Yes.
become successful. And for nonprofits, it's like, oh no, you better get this done in a year. Our grants are even structured like that. Then let's write a huge report at the end about how you met it or how you didn't meet it. And that will determine if you get it again. And it's like, wait a minute, you're expecting us in 365 days to turn around something completely. I mean, the pressure that nonprofit executives and staff are under on a day to day basis is incredible. And there is burnout and there is stress. But, the good news is, Greg, this generation, I think we're calling them Gen Zers and Alpha Gen now. It's hard to keep up, but the ones that are in their 20s and 30s really want to change the world. They really want to change the world. And so, okay, we got a great group of people who are coming up and say, I don't want to make a gazillion dollars. There are a few who do want to make a gazillion, but more importantly, I want to make sure that everybody in my community is well taken care of and that the world doesn't implode from climate change or war or whatever, disease, whatever's going on. They really care about it. So let's create a great sector for them to step into and take the reins. I tell that to my students all the time. I say, you are the next generation. Sorry we messed it up so bad, but I am really hoping that you guys come up with some great ideas because I am counting on you as the next generation to take what we've started, this growth that we've had in the sector, which in the United States has been exponential since the 80s when federal government started shrinking, and take it to the next level. People should be asking each other, what's your philanthropy? What's your
Hmm.
philanthropy? I mean, that's not what's your business or what do you do, but what's your philanthropy? Like everybody should know instantly what they care about. And it can change. What I tell the entrepreneurs I work with, it's okay to care about, your kid's school, and then all of a sudden your aunt gets kidney disease or needs a transplant, and now you care about kidney disease and transplant and organ donate. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to add things to it. That's okay. It doesn't have to be like this I cared about since I was 2 years old. Yeah. But I often say to the next generation, I hope you help us. I hope you help sort out this sector.
I see the sector often dance around problems, and there seems to be hesitation to be very clear about maybe demanding how things work. And just to circle back this point about short-term, long-term philanthropy, charity, we have R&D budgets, to your point, in for-profit businesses. I have not heard of a charity that has an R&D budget, but I wish that charities could be clear about, yeah, I invested 5% of my revenue, of my donor revenue into an R&D project that may or may not pay out, and that's like CapEx in
Yeah.
for-profit companies. And then there's OpEx, which is paying the bills, right? The lights are on, salaries are paid. And this CapEx, OpEx language is something we're so used to in the for-profit world, and I have many clients in that space. And yet it's so absent in charities. And again, I can't change that. I don't know that you can, but there's so many industry associations, and I wish that what we're discussing right now was something that the industry could agree on, as almost a standard of how we move forward.
It's so tough to wrangle, though.
Why is it so tough for the industry to reimagine how it needs to operate going forward and to almost retrain the donors and the public
Mhm.
about how they should be viewed?
What comes to mind is three things. One is I don't think we have collective leadership all pulling in the same direction. I just don't. In the United States, I don't think we have collective leadership all pulling in the right direction. Some are advocating for more monies for administration and overhead, and some are seeing the big picture, and some are saying, "Oh my gosh, let's start a new nonprofit because this one isn't doing what I wanted to do." So we don't have collective leadership all pulling in the same direction. That's the first. Second is the inherent competition that's in America.
Hmm.
Like just like the story I told you last night about my friend who has worked in this field for a long time, telling her partner, "We'll start a nonprofit." I'm like, "Don't start a nonprofit. Become a program, collaborate, work together, the sum of the whole coming together and all of us working together will make children safer, will make water cleaner, will make more books available online and in libraries. Let's all of us work together versus being so siloed." The second point is collaboration. The third would be people get really passionate about this sector. They get really passionate about what they want to see happen, and passion can lead to tunnel vision.
Hmm.
So the issue I think about is gun control, gun safety in the United States. As you know, gun deaths are the number one leading cause of killing children and teenagers in the United States. And yet, every time a child is killed, their parents or their community often start a nonprofit to solve the gun violence issue. And I had to sit with a couple that's daughter had been killed, was 15 years old. We were working and they wanted to solve the issue. And Greg, I had to gently tell them that this was 3 years after Sandy Hook. And I said, 21 babies and 5 teachers were killed, and we did nothing. The fact that your 15-year-old girl was killed, I think we need to think about where you need to direct your energies. They were so passionate. They were so hurt. They were so wounded. But what they did that was so magnificent is they were the first call by this pastor who would be responding to families who were being told that their child had been killed. And they helped the parents because they knew what it was like that first night, that first week, that first month. They knew what that was like. And that's where they could affect change. But when
Hmm.
they started their nonprofit, they wanted to stop gun violence. So I think we get so passionate. The third thing was we get so passionate, we almost get this tunnel vision because we've been wounded, we've been hurt, we've experienced it. If we've been raped, we want to start a rape prevention, nonprofit organization. These are not easy topics to say to somebody, "Good idea. Can I redirect you in a different direction?" that will allow you to affect the change that you want to affect in your community. I mean, when there's a fire and somebody's house burns, we don't start a new fire department. We just say, "Okay, what does that fire department need so that the house wouldn't have burned? Or what does that house need so that the house wouldn't have burned?" We don't start a new fire department and say, "Well, they were a minute late or, the house burned." We don't do that. Yet in nonprofits, we do that all the time because of our passion. We don't want another house to burn. We don't want another child to be killed. We don't want another person to be raped. We will start another person to have breast cancer. We do it in breast cancer. We do it any type of cancer, and we seem to do it a lot, at least in the U.S., with gun violence. And there are magnificent organizations doing great work out there already on those issues. So our passion leads us to the sector to be bifurcated.
The stories are there and they're heartbreaking often and sometimes uplifting.
Yeah,
And the passion is there. And we talk about your students or those next generations wanting to be part of a community, wanting to
yeah.
be of something bigger than themselves. And yet, my judgment is that the industry is failing in exactly engaging the next, wave of donors, whether that's Gen Z, millennials, or even Gen X. They're abandoned, in my
Mhm,
experience, at many
mhm.
charities. There are really no giving officers often assigned to a Gen X because they only give several $1,000s a year, not $100,000 a year. So the giving pyramid that we started with, my
Yep.
judgment is that anything below a certain threshold is kind of abandoned. It's an afterthought. And yet we have these amazing stories that we can be passionate about to engage that base with so they can move up at some point in the future.
We can also overlook those small gifts. And here's where we go back to paying salaries and overhead. And people, oh, I want to go to programs. Well, if you don't have enough program officer or if you don't have enough fundraisers, you have to decide what programs you're going to implement. And the easiest thing is dollar amount. We're only going to see people who gave 50,000 and above. We're only going to see people who gave 10,000 and above. But let me tell you this story. One of my clients, we every January we would look at their first time donors from the year before, and somebody had given $250 in March. So we're to the next January. We're 9, 10 months later. And I said, who is this person? Anybody know this person? No, no. So I said, some random person gives you $250. Yeah. So we did a little research and we found out he actually had the capacity to give $16 million, Greg. Did a
Well,
little
there you
bit more
go.
digging and found out that he was the best friend of a board member who had died.
Mm.
And he gave the $250 in honor of his friend. Somehow that got lost over the 9, 10 months before. So we decided we would like to name the boardroom because the board member had been on the board for 40 years. We would like to name the boardroom after the board member. And we went to him and we asked for $500,000. And of course, he said yes. He
Well,
wanted
it's
to honor his friend.
amazing.
So while we look at that giving pyramid, that $250 donor, if that nonprofit did not have that practice in place where annually they looked at the previous 12 months, who was a brand new donor that we have no idea why they gave. I mean, I often say to clients of mine, I'll say, how often do you get a $5,000 check in the mail? I mean, you're just overlooking this. I mean, this is somebody raising a sign saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. I want to be involved. But because we have this other side that says, "Ooh, we gotta keep overhead low. Oh, we can't hire more fundraisers." Our only choice is to say, "Okay, for the greater ROI, I need my fundraiser seeing people over $10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000." And it skews the pyramid and the cracks begin in the foundation because I'm telling you now to everybody who's listening to this, y'all have that $250 story
Hmm.
in your donor base. You just haven't found that yet. You don't have that practice in place where you pull that out.
Well, you spoke earlier about one of your passions being working with entrepreneurs. It almost feels to me like you are advocating for the industry to be more professional and to embrace everything that goes with it, but maybe also to be a little bit more intrapreneurial because there is also a cost to being, we can be professional, but we can also be creative, right? And we can also be scrappy and fast.
Absolutely. If everybody who listens to this takes and watches this takes one thing away, and the one thing is annually, I'm going to review everybody who's a brand new donor the last 12 months. They're going to raise a lot more money. Do a little research on them, assign your staff to go see them. You put them on your prospect list, put them on your board's list. whatever you have to do, because that's how people start out. I mean, people start out usually small. Those big gifts that we hear about did not start out as big gifts, they started out as small gifts. And somehow in today's society, we want to get the home run. We want to get the goal score. We don't want to do the pass, or we get an at bat. We want it all. And we don't value the baby steps that sometimes we have to take to get there. And I think entrepreneurs have patience. Entrepreneurs are energetic, and they're often agitated and they want to go, but they get the long view. I was
Yes.
raising $55 million for a campaign, and we lost our lead donor, $15 million. We lost the person. The stock market fell. They pulled out, and that was their right, absolutely. But what I did, Greg, I wrote my resignation letter, and I went into my boss and I said, I messed up. And so he pulled together the couple of committees. It ended up first starting with the committee chairs of the board, and then a couple committees, and they were all entrepreneurs. And they're like, okay, what do we do now? How do we back it up?
Hmm.
Where else do we go? And we ended up coming with a totally different plan. Instead of $55 million for a building, we renovated a building, and
Hmm.
they raised money. We had a finance team, and we had a building team, and it was the entrepreneurs who led the way, because they're used to setbacks. They're used to not getting the loan. They're used to VCs saying no, or capital not coming in, especially women. We got to do better with our women with VC dollars, but they're used to it. And I was like, okay, give me back that resignation letter. I said, but my response was very static, like, okay, I messed up. We lost the big donor. We're never going to raise the money. And the entrepreneurs like, it was a bump in the road, like a speed
Hmm.
bump. It did not throw them, it did not excite them. I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm at this meeting, they're gonna roast me, it's terrible." They're like, "Okay, what are we gonna do now?" Because the problem still existed. We had more students than we had classroom space. The problem, they kept their eye on solving the problem. I got stuck in the methodology, and I think a lot of fundraisers get stuck in the methodology that we've been trained in, and they're not entrepreneurial, let alone entrepreneurial. So get those entrepreneurs on your board, get them involved in your problems. They will help you solve them smartly.
I have two final questions. One is, what do you know about how to solve these cracks in the donor permit today that you wish you knew at the start of your career?
Do not overlook prospective donors because of your blinders. I overlooked entrepreneurs all the time. I skipped names on donor lists if they had the last name in the company. So if it was like Michael Dell Computers, I would have skipped over that. Like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, he's probably operating out of his garage, because that was my bias. That was my preconceived notion. Everybody is a potential donor. Don't overlook people. Don't let your own biases prejudice you toward a list you're reviewing. I'm not saying make the whole list, people with their last names and their businesses, but maybe throw a couple in and see how it goes.
Hmm.
Maybe, we always hear teachers and nurses don't make a lot of money. Some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them found ways to do it. Go and see them. I had this one person, great donor, and she was online engineer at a major automotive company, and had married and divorced pretty early, so was on her own. And she said the best piece of, and I listened, and she said the best piece of advice she got was buy stock, at least one, stock, every time, share of stock every time she got a paycheck. And she did. And she,
Hmm.
what she said to me? She goes, Lisa, it really is true. The second million is easier to make than the first.
Hmm.
I mean, people had overlooked her name. She wasn't married. She was an engineer. And she just, because I took a chance and I listened, and she said, the second million is easier to make than the first, because she'd always bought a share of stock with her paycheck, whether the automotive company was up or down. So I would say what I wish I knew is I overlooked a lot of potential
Hmm.
donors, or as some people like to call them, investors in the nonprofit, because of my own biases. So check your biases.
I love that, especially us entrepreneur, and I think that that applies both to my team and customers. Frankly, there are these
Yeah.
diamonds in the rough hiding in plain sight everywhere.
Absolutely.
Um,
And we
and my
often judge a book by its cover. I pulled up to this going to see a board member of a client of mine, and it was a metal building out by O'Hare. And I was like, oh God, that's a waste. And it was a disease related organization, and this
hmm,
person had this disease in their family. And I walk in, and there's terracotta warriors. I'm like, okay, this got a little interesting because they manufacture what he makes in China.
hmm. Oh
And
wow.
all of a sudden, like pulling up, I was like, oh, this is a waste. Like, why am I here? If I get inside and I start paying attention. The other thing is we often overlook women. We often default, and that was a bias of mine, when I was young in my career. Now I'm, in my fifth decade and this stuff. And so that's hard to believe. Fifth decade, but yes, I often overlooked women, would go and see the male part of the couple. At that time, that most couples were heterosexual and would see the male part and never involve the female in
Huh.
the conversation. That was a bias I had.
A friend of mine says humans are judgment making machines, and as much as
Yeah.
we like to believe that we don't judge, of course we judge,
Oh, we do.
and we will continue to judge. So, final question. I'm really curious about this one. Looking ahead, what emerging trends do you foresee specifically in digital fundraising? What's a key trend that non-for-profits should be really thinking about, specifically in the context of digital fundraising?
Use it.
Hmm.
I have so many clients and people who don't understand, who aren't engaging with this next generation and wanting to do the old stayed ways. And what I say to the next generation is don't throw out the old ways just because they're older. But I would say use it. I have so many faculty members who are scared of AI. And I'm like,
Huh.
oh my God. It's like when I was in algebra and I had to buy a Texas Instruments calculator and they wouldn't let me use it in math class. Like, hello, it's here. Let's harness it. Let's use it, And I've showed some of my clients, like, we do not have to spend weeks on this. Let's get a foundation. Now, AI is not perfect, and there's all sorts of things that are scary about it, wrong with it. But there are a lot of things that you can use it for that will help you if you don't have the staff and the people to move forward. So I say embrace it. When I talk to my clients, and they'll say, well, Greg didn't answer my email. Right. He's coming at you. He knows you want to talk to him about money. And I go, well, do you have Greg's cell phone? I go, yeah. Did you call Greg? Well, I go, Greg would not have given the organization his cell phone number if he wasn't okay with them calling. Call Greg. And they're like, well. I go, call, and during COVID, I would say that to a lot of my clients. I say, have you called? Have you called your donors? Have you called your board members to see how they're doing? They had the most beautiful conversations because all of us remember where we were when the world shut down. All
Sure.
of us remember exactly where, and we didn't have anybody to talk to. I mean, if you live alone like I do, or you had a spouse, they were tight. They were there when it happened. They didn't need to know. So what I say to my clients is use all the tools in your toolbox. I have made some of the best deals on Facebook messaging, on LinkedIn. I've tweeted, and gotten corporations involved. And what they seem to think is they have one arrow in their quiver or two arrows in their quiver. It's like use them all. Use them all. Use if somebody's connected to you on LinkedIn, send them a message on LinkedIn if you can't get through to them at their work email, or pick up the phone and call them. Check their LinkedIn. Did they list a phone number there? I mean, use all the tools. We have so many ways to communicate with people, but we are overloaded. Here's a thought I'll leave you with, that when the world went from 1999 to 2000, my mom was really scared. And so I bought her books on what the world was like when it went from 999 to 1000, what they
Hmm.
supposed it was like, the quietness of it, the wind, things you could hear. But in that book, I read that we receive more messages, Greg, in a single day than people in the Middle Ages received in their entire lifetime. Think about that. We receive more messages in a single day than people in the Middle Ages received in their entire lifetime. Because if you're watching news, you got the time, the flash flood, the alerts, the breaking news, the video, anything. You've got your phone going off, if you've got a smartwatch, all of that. The challenge for nonprofits is getting through all that, is getting through all those messages so that the Gregs and the Lisas see, oh, you want me to serve on this committee? Oh, you want me to have a meeting with you? Oh, you want this to happen? So my message to nonprofit leaders is use all the tools available because you need them. You need them to get your message through. And you don't want your message only to go through when there's a crisis. I've had some nonprofit leaders say, well, I want my crises, so everyone pays attention to me. I said, no, you don't. You want steady flow. You want people paying attention to you. Everybody shows up when there's a crisis. When a neighbor, has something happen, everybody shows up and then they fade away. We don't want people to fade away. We don't want our donors to fade away, especially those that are at the bottom end of the pyramid, the lower end of the pyramid. We want to shore up those foundations. We want to put some mortar in those cracks. We want to use AI, use the digital platforms to make sure you're shoring up the base of your pyramid foundation.
I think that's a wonderful way to close this discussion. Lisa Dietlin, CEO, the Institute of Transformational Philanthropy, and the faculty member and acting chair at the DePaul University School of Public Service. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Greg.